Aston Martin fixed it. The Honda vibration crisis that left Fernando Alonso unable to feel his own hands at 300 km/h. The problem that forced 2 double retirements and sent the car back to Japan for emergency testing was gone. At Miami, the car felt normal. For the first time in 2026, both drivers completed a full race distance. At least, that was the good news. The bad news arrived in qualifying, when a completely different failure made the car impossible to drive. Random downshifts. The gearbox and the electronics lost their connection. No speed out of corners. The rear locking without warning on entry. A bad surprise. And a car that was impossible to drive. Racing it in rain with that level of random downshifts would be dangerous. This is Aston Martin's first gearbox built in-house. Previous cars used parts bought from other teams, and the first time the vibrations were no longer hiding everything underneath, the gearbox was the next thing to break. 4 races into the 2026 season, Aston Martin sits last in the Constructors' Championship, 11th of 11 teams, 0 points. Both drivers have failed to escape the first round of qualifying at every single Grand Prix. The car Adrian Newey designed, the car Honda built a power unit for, the car Fernando Alonso staked the final years of his career on, is the slowest machine on the grid. Alonso turns 45 in August. His contract expires in December, and every weekend the AMR 26 spends at the back of the field is another weekend he will never get back. That is the thread running through every technical problem, every engineering fix, every press conference where the message is one of patience and acceptance. Time is the one resource Aston Martin cannot manufacture, and it is the one thing Fernando Alonso is running out of. The vibration crisis started before the season even began. During pre-season testing in Bahrain, the Honda RA626H power unit shook so badly it destroyed the car's batteries, which are limited to just 2 per driver per season under the cost cap. The team knew the problem was serious. They raced anyway. At the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne, the situation was bad enough that Alonso could do no more than 25 laps in a row before risking lasting nerve damage to his hands. Stroll's limit was even shorter, around 15 laps. Both drivers were losing feeling in their fingers and feet while driving at over 300 km/h. The team was not dealing with a speed problem, it was dealing with a health risk. Alonso started 17th on the grid and climbed to 10th in the opening laps. The pace existed, buried somewhere inside the AMR 26. The team pulled him in on lap 13 to protect his body, sent him back out 11 laps later to gather data, then retired him for good around lap 21 of 58. Stroll completed 43 laps before a battery issue ended his afternoon. 2 cars entered the Australian Grand Prix. Neither finished. 2 weeks later in Shanghai, the vibrations returned. Stroll's battery failed on lap 9. Alonso pushed deeper, reaching around lap 33 before the situation became impossible. Between laps 20 and 35, he lost feeling in his hands and his feet. Television cameras captured the moment he took both hands off the steering wheel at full speed, shaking them, trying to get the feeling back. He was running last on track, a full lap behind, and there was no point risking his body for nothing. That image, a 44-year-old 2-time world champion shaking his numb hands at 300 km/h in the slowest car on the grid, is the defining image of Aston Martin's 2026 season so far. After Melbourne, Alonso's hands recovered within 30 minutes. It was the first time in his career that a race weekend had left his body in that state. At 24 years old, nerve pressure heals fast. At 44, the margins are thinner. Every race that hurts his body is a race that tests whether his body can still do this at all. Japan came next. Suzuka, Honda's home track. The team tested a new steering column part during Friday practice that helped with the shaking, then removed it for qualifying in the race, a choice that confused Alonso, who felt the same vibrations come back right away. He finished 18th, a lap down, nowhere near the points. It was Aston Martin's first finish of 2026. Stroll retired with a water pressure problem. 3 races, 2 double retirements, 1 18th place finish, 0 points, and a driver whose hands were going numb inside the cockpit. Honda traced the cause to a shaking problem built into the car itself. The RA626H creates vibration patterns at certain engine speeds that the AMR 26 body makes worse instead of absorbing. The car acts like a speaker box for the engine's vibrations. The battery, stacked next to the MG UK, was shaking itself apart. That battery layout is the result of a deliberate design choice. The AMR-26 was built around the idea of making the power unit shorter to free up aerospace at the rear. One way to do that was to stack the battery on top of the electronics and move the MG-UK ahead of the engine. It gave Newey the space he wanted for his aero concept. It also created the exact conditions for the vibration crisis. Honda's short-term fix through those first 3 races was blunt. Lower the RPM ceiling. Less shaking, but also less power from an engine that already needed more. The real fix needed test time the race calendar could not give them. That time came from a source nobody expected. The Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, set for April, were both cancelled due to conflict in the Middle East. The 5-week gap gave Honda the window to ship a full AMR-26 to their Sakura Research Center in Japan. They ran the car on a test rig, isolating the vibration patterns, testing fixes, and building new parts. The details were kept private. The results showed up in Miami. By the Miami Grand Prix, the vibrations were gone. The car felt normal. Both drivers finished the sprint and the Grand Prix together for the first time all season. Stroll completed a full race distance without a battery failure. On the vibration front, the Honda fix worked. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. New Formula One analysis goes up every week. While all of that was unfolding inside the Aston Martin garage, the rest of the 2026 grid was racing for championships. Mercedes sits at the top, dominant in a way nobody predicted. 19-year-old Kimi Antonelli leads the drivers' standings with 100 points after 4 races and 3 victories. Ferrari is second, McLaren is third, Red Bull is recovering, and Aston Martin is not just behind, it is behind everyone, 11th of 11 constructors. Behind Cadillac, a team racing its first season in Formula One. Behind teams running a fraction of Aston Martin's budget. In 2025, Aston Martin finished 7th with 89 points. This is not a dip, this is a freefall. Fixing the vibrations did not make the AMR-26 competitive. It made it drivable. Those are 2 different things. In Miami, Alonso qualified 15th, Stroll qualified 17th. Both finished the Grand Prix, a full lap behind the leaders. During sprint qualifying, the gap was even more embarrassing. Stroll set no competitive time. Alonso's fastest lap, after track limits deletions removed his better efforts, was slower than the worst qualifying lap posted by a Formula 2 car. Formula 2 had never raced at Miami before. An Aston Martin Formula 1 car was lapping behind a junior category vehicle. The qualifying deficit to the front sits at approximately 2 seconds. The car weighs at least 10 kilograms over the 768 kilogram minimum. Even with a completely different power unit, the AMR-26 would still be a midfield car. The chassis problem is real, separate from the engine, and not something a vibration fix was ever going to solve. And that is what makes the gearbox failure in Miami so worrying. Each fix peels back a layer and shows the next problem underneath. The vibrations hid the battery weakness. The battery weakness hid the weight problem. The weight problem hid the aero gap. The aero gap hid the gearbox failure. This is not a team dealing with one crisis. This is a team running a car that was never ready to race, being built in real time against rivals who had 4 extra months to prepare. Alonso has seen this pattern before. Between 2015 and 2018, he spent 3 seasons inside a McLaren Honda, watching top-level engineers struggle to make a broken car fast. He left. He walked away from Formula One entirely. He raced at Le Mans. He ran the Indianapolis 500. He won the World Endurance title. He did everything else the sport had to offer because Formula One had nothing left to give him. He came back in 2021 because he believed the next chapter would be different. He chose Alpine first, then made the choice that shaped his late career. When Adrian Newey's move to Aston Martin was locked in, when Honda agreed to return as engine partner, when Lawrence Stroll put hundreds of millions into buildings and equipment, Alonso saw the pieces of a title fighting team coming together in front of him. He signed because this was the last real chance. There would not be another Newey. There would not be another factory engine deal. The window was now or never. The Newey signing was that chance. The Honda deal was the engine behind it. 2026 was the payoff. Alonso chose Aston Martin over safer options because he trusted that Adrian Newey, the most successful car designer in Formula One history, would build something worth driving in the final chapter of his career. Newey arrived on the 1st of March 2025. He was made team principal for 2026, replacing Andy Cowell. The Silverstone wind tunnel, the heart of Lawrence Stroll's hundreds of millions in spending, only became fully working in the spring of 2025. The first 2026 model entered that tunnel in mid-April 2025, roughly 4 months behind rivals. In Formula One aero work, 4 months is huge. It is the gap between showing up to testing with a finished car and showing up with a rough draft. The timeline got even tighter when Newey found that the wind tunnel data did not match how the car behaved on track during the summer of 2025. Fixing the tunnel cost more weeks at a point where weeks were already running out. While rivals pulled further ahead, Aston Martin was fixing their tools rather than making their car faster. In testing, the team ran 65 laps in Barcelona and 334 across 6 days in Bahrain. Both numbers were the lowest of any team on the grid by a wide gap. The shakedown was cut short. Bahrain running was held back by constant vibration failures. While Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren fine-tuned their setups and found speed, Aston Martin was still learning what their car could do without falling apart. The chassis was roughly the 5th fastest in Melbourne, not a crisis on its own. Combined with a Honda engine shaking the car apart, it was a crisis. Combined with a gearbox that fails when the vibrations stop covering for it, it becomes something worse. The defense from the Newey camp is familiar. The AMR26 is a basics first car with room to grow. The design is sound, the concept can improve, and the early gap is the price of starting late but starting right. Newey took the same path at Red Bull in 2009. The car was slow at first, the growth curve was steep. Within 2 seasons he built a title winner. The counter-argument carries weight. The pattern is familiar in Newey's career. He presents a problem, then figures out how to make it work. That is not the same thing as presenting an answer. Making him team principal on top of his design role has been widely seen as a mistake, with the logic that design genius and people skills are 2 very different things. And the 2009 comparison has a flaw that matters more than any other detail in the Aston Martin story right now. There was no cost cap in 2009. Red Bull could spend as much as they wanted on making the car better. Today, every dollar spent chasing the current gap is a dollar gone from the 2027 car. The margin for waste is razor thin. Major upgrades are being held back until the gap is small enough to spend wisely. Honda's role in any comeback sits on the other side of the story. The maker came back to Formula One after leaving the sport 4 separate times since 1964. The team that rebuilt the engine program lost most of its skilled staff during the 2021 exit. Many of the engineers working on the RA626 hatch are new to Formula One. Without the know-how built up over the past era, the Miami vibration fix has been treated in some headlines as a huge leap forward. The reality behind the scenes is more careful. It was a small step in the right direction. It will take time. The weekend ticked a few boxes. That gap between the headline and the honest truth matters, because it sets hopes the team is not backing. Real engine gains depend on the FIA granting Honda an ADUO, an extra upgrade window for teams that are too far behind. The FIA checks engine gaps at races 6, 12 and 18. Honda is almost certain to qualify given how slow they are, but the timing has shifted because of the Bahrain and Saudi cancellations. There are no car upgrades coming until after the summer break. Canada will be the same car. Austria will be the same car. That means at least 6 or 7 more race weekends of running last, failing to escape the first round of qualifying, finishing laps behind the leaders. 6 or 7 more weekends of a 44-year-old champion sitting in a car that cannot compete with any car around it. Canada on the 24th of May is the next race. The circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal is a heavy braking track, long straights into tight chicanes. If the random downshift problem from Miami qualifying reappears there, where braking performance is everything, it will confirm a deeper integration issue with the in-house gearbox rather than a one-off glitch. Heavy braking circuits are the concern now. Friday practice in Montreal will be the first real test of whether that gearbox failure was isolated or structural. His tone is not anger, it is measured, careful patience. The public stance is peace, a calm reading of the facts. The frustration is something everyone in the team needs to handle. When the question of a top 5 finish came up in Miami as a reason to extend his contract, Alonso laughed. "If I finish 5th in some race, I will probably retire that afternoon." Not because a 5th place finish would satisfy him, because it would mean a miracle happened, not progress. Everything points toward 2027. The better chance comes next year or the year after. Once the car has had time to grow, McLaren's 2023 to 2024 leap, where a midfield car became a title fighter in 12 months, is the model. If one team can do it, another can follow. Alonso recently became a father. His son Leonard was born during the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. The desire to keep racing until his son can watch him compete points strongly toward a contract extension rather than walking away. The question is not whether Alonso stays. The question is whether staying produces anything worth the time it costs him. Stroll is directing his frustration elsewhere. The 2026 regulations are, in his view, fundamentally flawed. Formula One is not fun to drive under the new rules. Formula 3 cars he tested during the break were 1,000 times more enjoyable. His seat is secure. His father owns the team. He still believes in the project. If Aston Martin reaches the front in 2 or 3 years without him, that will bother him. The car is overweight. Aero changes will come bit by bit. Major upgrades are on hold. Prize money drops with where you finish in the standings. Falling from 7th to 11th costs millions while the team spends heavily on Newey, Honda, and the new factory. The 2026 rules were supposed to be the Great Reset, the moment Aston Martin's spending on people and buildings would finally turn into results. Instead, the team that spent more than almost anyone to get ready is further behind than at any point under Lawrence Stroll. Talk of interest from Chinese car maker BYD has been denied, but the gap between the money going in and the results coming out has never been wider. The markers that would change the picture are clear. Either car reaching the second round of qualifying before the summer break, both cars finishing in the points at any pre-summer race. The qualifying gap falling below 1.3 seconds before Spa. If those targets are hit, the car has the growth Newey claims, and the 2027 story becomes real. If none of them are hit, the AMR26 concept is broken at a level that updates cannot fix, and the most successful car designer in Formula One history will face the truth that his name alone cannot solve a problem this deep. At the start of the Miami weekend, Aston Martin told Fernando Alonso the vibrations were fixed. At least, that was the good news. By qualifying, there was a new problem. By the checkered flag, there was another weekend at the back of the grid. By the press conference, there was another promise that next year will be better. Alonso has heard that promise before. The difference is that last time, he had years to wait. Now he has months. YouTube thinks you should watch this next. Click it. And if you made it to the end, subscribe.